That sounds like a velociraptor.
They don't want you to see this. They tried to cover it up back in '89. You see, some filmmakers went into the depths of the Amazon rainforest, seeking out the truth behind some weird footprints, and got footage of a living, breathing brontosauroid dinosaur.
What?
They put the footage into a documentary, but the building they were editing the footage in and the warehouse they stored the backup footage in mysteriously burned down.
You can't be serious.
However, unbeknownst to the secret government agents surely involved in the fires, a few negatives showing this dinosaur were sent to one of the filmmaker's friends, who happened to be my buddy's uncle's college roommate's cousin's boyfriend, and I tracked it down to show you the truth.
I guess we need to talk about living dinosaurs and lost worlds. The idea that there is a remote part of the Earth where dinosaurs still roam has been a popular idea in media since the dinosaur mania of the late 19th century, with works like Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth and Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's The Lost World exploring the idea in fiction. However, people also began claiming dinosaurs were roaming the jungles of South America, Asia, and most commonly Africa. There's a whole list of cryptids, animals that are only known from anecdotal evidence, that some people claim are examples of dinosaurs or other Mesozoic life forms that still exist in the modern world. You got the ropin, the Loch Ness Monster, Kongomoto, some unnamed sauropods in the Amazon basin, Amela Nuntuka, the Kazai Rex, and most famously the Mokele-Mbembe. Generally, the Mokele-Mbembe is described exactly like the 19th and 20th century view of sauropod dinosaurs as these semi-aquatic beasts that had trouble supporting their massive bulk out of the water, which the discovery of trackways and the dinosaur renaissance fully rejected. The Mokele-Mbembe was introduced to Western audiences by Carl Hagenbeck, who, is a bit of a controversial figure, who basically created the modern zoo by putting animals in large, open, naturalistic enclosures, but also captured and exhibited indigenous people in exhibits next to the animals. Anyway, while off in Africa capturing animals and people to ship back to Europe, he heard about the Mokele-Mbembe and thought the description sounded a lot like a brontosaurus because it was 1909 and Western society was in the midst of a dinosaur craze, and the mislabeled brontosaurus at the American Museum of Natural History was world famous. The media latched onto claims of living dinosaurs in Africa and continued to twist the story. The legend was relocated from what is today Zimbabwe to the Congo Basin because the global north doesn't care about African geography. To many white people, the idea made sense. They saw Africa as this primordial, savage land. Why couldn't there be dinosaurs? Which is kind of ironic for an organism that evolved along with many other recent mammal lineages as a result of the dynamic nature of said continent, to think. Today, the Mokele-Mbembe has fully been consumed by people discussing a living dinosaur in the Congo, which of course it has been. This whole living dinosaur thing is thinly veiled colonialism, not only because it is derived from a wholly false view of Africa and stereotypes of indigenous cultures there, their stories about animals or legends of the region also represent stuff that Europeans could discover and name for them. Actually, the whole idea of a lost world is a pretty colonial view, and this is true of lost world fiction. I mean, in Conan Doyle's book, the white Europeans help the indigenous culture of a prehistoric plateau they have come to explore win a war against ape men in an example of the problematic white savior cliché. The hunt for the Mokele-Mbembe soon got taken over by people looking to disprove evolution, because it would do that apparently, who got upset by all the independence movements in Africa, which made it harder to go search swamps in the wrong part of the continent. This whole search for living dinosaurs thing is like really wild, and is a rabbit hole I have to stop going any further down because I wanted to talk about the history of claims about lost worlds as a framing device to talk about living archosaurs in the Amazon that give off dinosaur vibes. And well, there are some living dinosaurs in the Amazon. They're called birds. The Amazon rainforest seems to have formed about 10 million years after the extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs, but that doesn't mean the rainforest has remained completely static. The river once flowed into the Pacific, but when the Andes rose up along the western coast of South America and blocked off the river mouth, the entire basin flooded and formed a massive lake. Then, sometime between 10 and 5 million years ago, the waters broke through to the Atlantic and drained back into a river basin. Around 20,000 years ago, during the last ice age, the region was marked by vegetative shifts due to the globally cooler and drier climate. Then, 11,000 years ago, humans arrived and began managing this rainforest, completely reshaping the forest by creating terra preta, extremely fertile anthropogenic soils that are now found throughout the basin, which they used to develop many farming communities, towns, and definitely a few great cities in the depths of the jungle. Adapting to this dynamic landscape, several creatures that look like prehistoric bygones and many species of avian dinosaurs still live in the Amazon today. Let's go on a search for them. Descending downhill from the old-growth tierra firme forests, we enter a palm swamp. The humid environment has caused recent man-made structures to collapse, making it difficult to traverse. This looks like a place that could easily harbor a dinosaur or two, and there are some here, a social flycatcher seeking prey, or macaws searching for a roost. This habitat, though, is home to some less feathery reptiles, but we will have to wait until the sun sets and the swamp is shrouded in darkness. Shining lights out across the still water, fiery reflections gleam back. We are surrounded by caiman, small crocodilians who come out to hunt in the dark. They are related to alligators, being in the same family. Despite being fearsome hunters, they are not the top predators here, as a far larger reptile has a preference for this habitat, the green anaconda. However, no giant snakes appeared in the tannin-stained waters or grassy shores of the small lake. While these caiman may have a dinosaur-like appearance, they are not dinosaurs. They are distant crocline archosaur cousins. Though, they still share many key features such as teeth in deep sockets and fenestrae, holes in the skull to make it lighter. However, due to being specialized semi-aquatic predators, crocodilians like caiman have lost the large antorbital fenestra that is prominent in most dinosaur skulls. Birds also have very derived archosaur skulls with large orbits, sometimes less obvious fenestrae, and long ago lost their teeth. While the caiman certainly looks prehistoric, one living Amazon dinosaur feels like about as much of a prehistoric throwback as they are. To find this living dinosaur, though, we must travel to a different watery habitat. Away from the palm swamps and down near the river on the floodplain, there are many oxbow lakes, or kochas. These are the remnants of old river bends, long abandoned for a more direct route. Overgrown with vegetation, this too seems like a suitable place to meet a dinosaur. Once again, we head out on a canoe. These oxbow lakes are home to many species of wildlife, some lurking in the murky waters, others perched in the thick foliage above. Some in this diverse bird community, like the kingfishers and anhinga, are fish eaters hunting in the lake, but we are seeking a different bird. There are animals in that tangle of foliage. Sounds like a velociraptor. That is a very distinctive-looking bird. This is our target, the Hoatzin. The Hoatzin is incredibly unusual, but don't just take my word for it, for I have brought on fellow YouTuber BioBush to explain what makes this bird, well, unique.
So, Hoatzin are the only living members of the bird order Opisthocomiformes. Like many other bird orders, they separated from other birds at about 64 million years ago. If that time is ringing a bell in your brain, it is because something famous happened 65 million years ago, the mass extinction of the non-avian dinosaurs. Once, birds from this order could be found around the world, but only one species is left, in riparian habitats in tropical South America. This bird has many unusual features. For one, this bird eats leaves as its primary diet, which is really unusual. Digesting leaves requires several body adaptations that are really unhelpful for a flying bird. So think about how you eat leaves. You use your strong jaw muscles, your big teeth, and your complex digestive system. All of those things are great, but they're all heavy, and a bird has to carry all of those things up into the air when it flies. While the Hoatzin doesn't have teeth, they do have a digestive system unique among birds. They have an expanded crop which is folded into two parts. They can ferment leaves. The fermenting leaves in the bird's crop apparently gives them a distinctive smell, earning them the nickname stink bird. Now, I've never smelled a Hoatzin, but add that to your list of life goals. Okay, we need to talk about that one thing that has put the Hoatzin in like every dinosaur encyclopedia. The claw. So Hoatzin chicks hatch from the egg with 2 claws on each wing. The young birds use these claws to climb. To escape predators, they'll drop into the water below their nest, then clamber out and climb back up to the nest. These wing claws disappear as the bird matures. However, while they're still present, the claws are reminiscent of those seen in the fossils of Archaeopteryx, which is why the Hoatzin inevitably comes up when discussing the early evolution of birds. Individuals of other bird species can have wing claws, but every young Hoatzin does. Hoatzin chicks leap into the water for safety from predators, and those claws are probably an adaptation to help them climb back up to their nest. Clawed chicks would have more mobility than other young birds.
Thank you, Steve. Don't forget to go over to the BioBush channel after this. Anyway, as Steve just stated, Hoatzin are not some relic from the Jurassic. They are highly derived. However, all birds share interesting traits that exist because they are theropod dinosaurs, some of which make a whole lot more sense if you view birds as living dinosaurs. Let us first start by talking about those wing claws. Most birds do not have claws on their wings. However, from time to time vestigial claws have been detected on a range of other birds. Uniquely though, the Hoatzin and another odd group of birds from Africa called the turacos almost always have wing claws as chicks, despite the two not being closely related. You see, in the genetics of all birds, there are many genes that their ancestors had, just either modified or turned off. What seems to have happened with the Hoatzin, turaco, and other random individual birds that hatch with wing claws is a mutation reactivates a dormant claw gene. For most birds, this either has no advantage or is a disadvantage. But for the Hoatzin, having wing claws helps the chick survive to adulthood, and so is selected to become ubiquitous in the species. Many other traits the Hoatzin shares with other birds are also remnants of theropod morphology. Perhaps the most notable avian feature they inherited from their dinosaur forebears is the one that leads to many questions about bird anatomy. When looking at a bird, it is easy to think that this joint here is the knee, which bends opposite to ours. This, though, is not the knee. This is the ankle. The actual knee is up here, often obscured by feathers. The why is actually quite interesting. So looking back at our caiman friends, the catofemoralis longus muscle runs between the femur and the tail. This muscle is long, as the name implies, and is the primary way that they propel their hind limbs. Dinosaurs like T-Rex similarly would have had this muscle powering those large muscular hind legs attached to the massive tail. A bird, though, has a very reduced tail to save on weight, the vertebrae fusing into the pidgostyle just beyond the hip. This means that the catofemoralis longus is greatly reduced or even non-existent, so unable to propel the bird's hind limbs. So birds over time have reduced the femur to a point that it is basically fixed in place, putting weight and walking on the knee joint rather than the hip, making birds move completely differently than any other group of tetrapods. Looking at the hip, let's talk about the pelvis and the seemingly biggest contradiction in bird evolution. Dinosaurs are broken into the lizard-hipped saurischians and the bird-hipped ornithischians. But theropods are saurischians, which means birds are lizard-hipped dinosaurs. This seems confusing, but is actually pretty easy to explain. The bird pelvis and say that of Triceratops are convergent, their similarity only being in how a 19th century scientist thought they looked. Actually, looking at the hips of bird-lined theropods, you can watch this bit, the pubis, fold back to the way it is in modern birds. Why seems to be a mystery, but it also appears in another derived theropod clade, the therizinosaurs. One final critical part of avian anatomy derived from that in earlier theropods are the air sacs. These are special parts of the respiratory system that are, as they sound, spaces inside the body filled with air. They are attached to the lungs and actually give birds incredibly efficient breathing. They are able to bring fresh air into their lungs and discharge CO2, both during inhalation and exhalation. Birds have greatly expanded air sacs from those that have been shown to be in non-avian dinosaurs, with a large space inside the pelvis to accommodate them. This system even takes advantage of the fixed femur, which helps keep the posterior air sacs from collapsing, taking what likely existed in theropods to an extreme and achieve the incredible efficiency of avian breathing. My friend, today I tracked down the Hoatzin, a bird that really reminds me of a dinosaur. Despite the awkward flight of this large bird, they are rarely hunted because of course an animal called the stinkbird would not taste great. However, they are threatened by loss of habitat, especially because they are only found in their preferred habitat along rivers and oxbow lakes. At this time, the Amazon rainforest is under unprecedented threat primarily from cattle ranching, soy production for livestock, and other practices such as gold mining, trying to bring economic growth to the people here. Often, the farming here is done to get to the terra preta, soils made by indigenous Amazonians thousands of years ago, who were able to farm and develop civilizations without upsetting the ecological balance of these forests. The whole thing reminds me of those paintings of the Dark Ages, where there are these people barely scratching out a living in the shadow of Roman ruins. I hope one day the secrets of these original inhabitants can be figured out, and people can live within the Amazon, alongside all these incredible animals, some of which look like they could belong living alongside a stegosaurus. The Amazon rainforest, a tangle of green full of stories about dangerous creatures and disappearances. What is the most dangerous thing in this jungle? And how do you survive its grasp? Night in the Amazon rainforest. It's very quiet, unnaturally quiet.